Part 4. So we made it. Finally here. This one's going to go for a bit longer, but that couldn't be helped. It's just a long one. There's so much included in this. This opening statement we're about to hear is just it's right into the fucking deep end. So let's hear it.
Mr. Binnall, I want to explore a little bit further in terms of what access you did not have to the information you requested to verify this. Again, I value the paper backups, I value the controls, but they're only as good as they're actually used, and they only provide confidence to the extent that it's a transparent process. So just speak a little bit to what you had access to, what you did not have access to, what you're denied, and then go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The very sad fact is that we were denied access to almost anything meaningful that would allow us to verify.
Can you be specific?
Absolutely, Senator. Let's talk about the paper backups on the electronic machines. We were denied any access to those except for from one machine in the entire state of Nevada.
It's so insulting. It's so insulting. That's brutal. That is so brutal. That's so fucking harsh. One. That's such an insult. Holy fuck. How did they get away with that?
We were denied that access. I wish I could have quoted Mr. Krebs when we were fighting our discovery fights at the in Nevada, saying how important it was to get access to these. We couldn't see any paper backups, and on top of that, the printers on the machine were malfunctioning at such a high rate. We doubt that the paper backups were actually giving us anything of use anyhow. So these paper backups that are supposed to provide such transparency, we couldn't use them. We couldn't see them. We couldn't use they provided us zero transparency at all, except in one machine in the entire state of Nevada. Another example is the fact that we were denied any meaning.
That was a tear just then. I wiped away a tear. I laughed so hard.
Full discovery in the case in order to go and examine the full extent of the voter fraud. For instance, even when we were able to subpoena the records that led us to discover those 4,000 non-citizens who voted, we couldn't put that into evidence because we didn't get them until the end of the discovery period. And then the court said, well, at that point, it's too late. Our discovery period was essentially 3 days. And we were denied any meaningful opportunity to even use in our case the information that we got. And the court didn't even consider those things, unfortunately. We were denied, we tried to be able to understand the code of these machines, to be able to find out, for instance, as the chairman pointed out, whether machines were hooked up to the internet, whether any of that happened, be able to do a forensic review. We brought forensic experts all the way to Nevada, people that could have discovered this information, people that could have told us what happened with these machines, and we weren't allowed near them. We weren't allowed any forensic audit of it. Nothing that could have given us any transparency, because transparency is not political. That's what we've talked about here. That's what we were denied in Nevada, is any attempt to actually find out what happened. Here's the troubling thing, is one of the reasons that they said that we couldn't get transparency on this machine is because they're proprietary. The information, the coding was proprietary. But we're talking about the countings of votes for the office of President of the United States.
Yeah, it shouldn't matter if they're owned by another company. That's irrelevant. It's like, we need this information. It's not like, oh, I can't give it to you because so-and-so has it. It's like, okay, I'll go get the fucking information that you've requested. That's how it fucking works.
And they're not going to let us see the code for how they actually coded the votes. You got to pick one. It's either open source.
Honestly, though, why would you need to know that it was done legitimately? Why can't you just trust all of the mainstream media?
And we exactly know the way that these machines are counting the votes, or you have to go back to a verifiable system to make sure that the results that are being reported are the results that we get from actual voters, because that is where democracy breaks down. That is really the fear that we have of losing democracy, is when it's not the people's votes that are being counted, but fraud that's being counted. And we can't just pretend that the emperor has any clothes if he doesn't. We can't pretend that we have a clean election when there's evidence to the contrary. And the way that we get that is through transparency. And we were denied that in Nevada at every single turn. We had a clerk who, a registrar of voters, who literally dodged our subpoenas. We had the holiday weekend over Thanksgiving in order to...
I mean, like, it's obviously not a laughing matter. Like, it's obviously not funny. But, I mean, I have to laugh. That's... It's so incredibly insulting, and it's so obvious what's happened, that if I don't laugh at it, I'll just fucking erupt. So, I mean, by that metric, it's fucking hilarious. Like, this is a fucking joke. This is genuinely ridiculous. What the fuck is this?
Serve subpoenas. They locked the doors of the offices. He locked himself in his house. He refused to accept a subpoena. That same register of voters, we have a whistleblower that says he was wearing a Biden-Harris pen to inspect voter sites. This isn't something where we're trying to attack officials. We're trying to say that we have to make sure that it's nonpartisan, that we have to make sure that there's transparency. And you can't deny transparency at every turn, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Krebs, real quick, mindful that, again, all this testimony is under oath. So what you heard from Mr. Binnall is testimony under oath. Does that trouble you? And in your assessment, this is the most secure election. Again, I'm all for paper backups. I'm all for those controls. I think if used, it works. We have a system of advocacy in terms of a legal system.
Is he giving him the finger?
Those
Let's just
controls.
watch that again.
If used,
Watch
it works.
the right hand.
We have a system of advocacy.
Yeah, it kind of seems like he's giving him the finger. I don't think that's deliberate, but it is funny nonetheless.
In terms of a legal system, you advocate for one side. It's a combative system, but both sides have to have information. Does that trouble you in terms of lack of transparency that Mr. Binnall?
What a fucking great question to put to him as well. It's like, hey, dickhead, we've got someone saying no, there was fraud. You said there was no fraud, so what do you have to say in response to that? Brilliant.
Testifying to under oath.
Let's hear what this guy says. You know what he's going to say? Nothing. Here's the question, and he's going to walk around it. That's what he's going to fucking do.
One is that in Commissioner Palmer's opening statement, he talked about the certification process, the voluntary voting systems guides, the certifications that happen at the state level, the logic and accuracy testing of these machines, the parallel testing that happens the day of or during the election process, the sampling and forensic audits. We saw Georgia do that with a number of their machines to ensure that the hashes matched what they expected. I do think that yes, we need to make sure that working with these vendors that we have the appropriate insight and transparency into the process. Certainly, I would,
Do you think he's answered the question very well? Do you even remember the fucking question?
I think we need to have a conversation on what the appropriate auditing process looks like. I have seen some auditing that is not necessarily up to snuff, so we need to explore that a little bit more fully. But again, if you've got, we're talking about paper backups, but we're also talking about paper ballots.
But again, only if they have. He's just said they didn't have access to the ballots. Again.
This fucking Senator Johnson is fucking switched on. Holy shit.
Yeah,
call him on his shit. Call him on it.
I'm not.
Again, all I'm asking, does that trouble you that there wasn't that kind of a transparency, or are you challenging his testimony?
Oh, of course not.
Oh, no. Of course not. Yeah, it fucking sounded like it, buddy.
So again, this system is, we only have confidence in it if it's completely transparent. And
this guy right here is saying that they weren't allowed access. Your whole thing relies on them having access. You're saying, oh no, it's all good because the paper ballots are there. That was his whole fucking testimony before. the entire one. Go back and watch it. Okay? And now this guy is saying, no, we didn't have access to it. That's blown. Case over. Like, holy fuck. Holy fuck. Is there anything more that needs to be asked after that?
Somebody who's challenging results has access to the information. The paper ballot backup can have their forensic experts take a look at the computer systems, and that wasn't afforded. I'm just asking, does that concern you?
I think that there are multiple controls in place throughout the system. If there is a legal mechanism at the back end that allows for independent third-party auditing.
But that's the problem. The legal system didn't allow for the transparency. Okay, you can talk about all these controls up front, but then in the end, where there are affidavits signed and people are making charges, when you can't obtain the evidence to actually try it in court, and your evidence is denied in court, do you understand how that frustrates people? And that's the problem. That's why there's suspicions, because this was not, in so many cases that we've heard about, a transparent process. But with that, I'll turn to Senator Scott.
Fuck. I wish he'd answered the fucking question.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson. And I want to thank Chairman Johnson for taking all the heat for hosting a hearing like
It really, it's not that giving an answer like that does nothing. An answer like that makes me think immediately that the opposing side is correct. Whatever the opposing side is, when someone gives an answer like that, I immediately believe the opposing side. That's just how it fucking works. That's how my fucking brain thinks. It's how I think everyone fucking thinks about this shit. As soon as someone gives a convoluted fucking answer like that, I switch off and I say, well, nothing this guy's saying is legit. And he didn't answer. I fucking listened to the entire fucking thing. He didn't answer the fucking question.
this. I think it's the right thing to do.
But again, sorry to keep pausing here, but thankfully that Senator Johnson guy, who's fucking leaving, by the way, who has already left now. So I mean, that's fucking devastating. But at least that dude was asking legitimate fucking questions, and he could see through the bullshit answer. I mean, I did not expect him to call that, and the fact that he did shows what a fucking intelligent person he is.
To get people to feel comfortable that our elections are free and fair, and if this one wasn't, that the next one will be. This is 2 years ago I got elected. I won election night by 54,000 votes. And Chuck Schumer sent a lawyer down and basically said, I don't care what the votes are, we're going to win through the courts. And we went through unbelievable number of lawsuits. We had, I think, something like 1,000 lawyers working with us. We went through 2 recounts. And he didn't care what the votes are. Chuck Schumer's goal was to win, and his lawyer was just to win through the courts. It didn't matter what the votes are. It didn't let me come to orientation. And so when I watch this stuff now, I did not remember one Democrat in this entire country say, that's not right. You shouldn't be doing it that way. They were all in on this, and nobody complained. So we've got to figure out how to do this where people feel comfortable. I can tell you, I live in Naples, Florida. Every time I go out, people come up to me and they're frustrated with the unfairness of the system. Now, of course, these are people that wanted Trump to win. They think that he lost unfairly, but they're mad. They're mad that because they hear about what happened in Wisconsin, they hear about what happened in other states, and then they're furious that they think the whole system's rigged. So one thing I did is in September, I put out a bill called the voter ID. We do absentee ballots, and it actually works in Florida. You have to be a registered voter. Your signatures have to match. You have to get your vote in, ask for your vote early. You have to get your vote in on time. It's your problem if you don't. It's not somebody else's. You don't get to vote after the fact. Your vote doesn't get to come in after the fact, and somebody count it. Although 2 years ago, the Democrat lawyer tried to do that. And we know that we get the votes out on time. We did it this time. So it seems to me that if we want people to feel comfortable in this country that these elections are fair, you have to show your ID. You can't be doing same day registration, because how can you tell if somebody is legal, illegal? I mean, how would you know? Do they live in that state? How would you know? You got to let people be able to watch ballots being opened. We had 2 election supervisors that were removed because of what they did in my election. And they were clear. They completely violated the law. And they found and tried to count 95,000 ballots after election night. Not in my favor, of course, in the Democrats' favor. So Judge Starr, what do you think?
95,000. He said that so fucking calmly. Wow.
About the need to have local elections, because I think what Mr. Krebs said is right. One of the reasons why we have good systems here is we don't have a national system. We have a local system. But should we have national standards? Should you have to have ID? Should your signatures have to match? Should you have to be? You can't get registered on the same day that you vote. All the things that we have, like we do in Florida, where you have to get your ballots early and all these things, and you know how many. By the way, you're supposed to announce how many ballots you have that night. You should know, right? They did in my election, and that's how they kept finding it. So, Judge Starr, what do you think about this idea that we have to have some national standards but still have local elections?
I think national standards need to be seriously considered in light of these recurring issues. We all have anecdotes. One of my friends, an academic leader in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where I used to live, here's an anecdote. One of his students, a registered voter in Vermont, but she's studying in Virginia, and she receives appropriately an absentee ballot from Vermont, but she receives 4 unsolicited ballots from the Commonwealth of Virginia, where she happens to not be registered to vote, but she's studying. And everyone is hearing these anecdotes, and they're saying, well, aren't there control mechanisms in place? And so the issue of decentralization is you will continue to have these varieties and vagaries unless and until there is some enormous reforms in state government, or then Congress using its powers under Article 2, under Article 1 in this particular instance, says we need to step in and have regulations to ensure integrity. And a signature requirement is one of the bases. I like to say, Senator Scott, you've got to show ID if you want to check into a hotel or get through some TSA security. So don't we want to have those kinds of safeguards just to ensure, yes, this is going to be an honest election, which I think is all we are all asking for.
So I'm not 100% on what he just argued for, but it sounded a lot like he was trying to argue that you have to at least show ID to vote. But that doesn't make sense, because why the fuck wouldn't it be that way? Maybe in Australia that seems like a fucking insanely obvious thing to do. I may just be learning right now that in America you don't need identification to vote. How? That's if I'm interpreting that right, that's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard of. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but that definitely sounds like that's what he just said. Oh, that is really fucking weird. Also, sorry about that guy. He is very dull. He just dulls the mood down.
So, Mr. Troupis and Mr. Binnall, if we had done some of these things and they'd been enforced in your states, would people feel comfortable that there was a fair election?
He is saying that. He is saying that these guys don't have to have ID. What the fuck?
Senator Scott, I think it would absolutely go miles to make sure that people were confident in the results of the election if we put in simple methods to make sure that the people who vote are who they purport to be, that one person only gets one vote, that
I can't believe I'm watching an argument right now. Oh, not even an argument, a discussion. I can't believe I'm watching a discussion right now over whether or not ID should be taken at a fucking polling booth for the president. I got nothing to say about
the way that the ballots are counted leads to an accurate total. These things shouldn't be partisan. These things should be exactly what we do to protect our republic and make it so that people know that the results are accurate. Because otherwise, you end up where we are today.
Obvious.
Senator, one of the fascinating things about Wisconsin is, as I said, we have a long history of real transparency in our process, in our recount process, in all of our processes. So it's particularly odd here. And several of the justices on our court this last week called what the Democrats had done in the majority of the court, in the Supreme Court, as absurd and bizarre. And the reason they referred to it that way is they said, the issue here is what confidence do people have in the election process? So if that's what we hear, and I've heard that, I've been hearing that all day here, confidence in the election process. Well, then why, when everything is teed up? I mean, you know, I'm a former judge. My co-counsel is a former president of the state bar. We had teed up everything. We absolutely, you knew the names, addresses, wards. You had exact records. And what the Biden campaign did not want the court to do is to actually address the substantive question. That's the holding of the court. We won't address the substantive question. And the Chief Justice, I mean, it's a great frustration in the Chief Justice when she said, 4 members of this court throw the cloak of latches over numerous problems that will be repeated again and again until this court has the courage to correct them. Candidly, it was all Democrat talking points. I mean, they did this make the same thing. I heard something about Justice Karofsky's comment. It was just a talking point. And I guess the frustration you hear from those of us who are serious lawyers, who have taken this seriously, is that when we pose these matters to courts, we expect them to address them. When they don't, it undermines the integrity of our system. That's what's going on here. The frustration that you hear.
Of course, 100% correct. 100% correct. Investigate it. If fucking Biden won, then that's what the results will show. If Trump won, that's what the results are going to show. How hard is it to do a fucking investigation into it? Like, god damn. It seems like such a simple fucking concept. Just provide proof. Make it known for everybody, definitively, who fucking won the election.
Even in good Democrat circles, is if the courts don't address these, who's going to? Aren't they the ultimate arbiters? There's no dispute that the election would have turned out differently in Wisconsin if, according to our allegations and according to our proofs, the court accepted those, that the election result would be different. But instead of addressing the substantive claims, the Biden campaign argues, don't talk about them. Don't address them. And that's why I thanked Senator Johnson when he first called and asked if I would talk, because if you don't inquire here in the Senate, and as Ken Starr said a minute ago, if you don't do this inquiry, there really isn't going to be any analysis, and there isn't going to be an opportunity to get the very integrity that we all want. I mean, as I said, as a former judge, and this is a serious matter to me, and no one suggested at any point in the process that the allegations in Wisconsin are anything but serious and substantive and documented. And yet a court takes the Biden line and says, we're just not going to talk about it. And that's just wrong. And that's the reason, one of the reasons, people don't trust this outcome.
Yeah. In Florida, we have a lot of people that moved from South America. And so a lot of them have said to me, how is this different than what Maduro's doing? Right? So, I mean, and part of it is, people don't have enough information, but it's so simplistic when you hear about people that are dead that are vote, people that don't live in the state to vote, and you hear all these things, and there's no recourse. So we've got to figure this out. We got to be able to prevent this from, I don't know if anything will happen with this election, but clearly we can't let this go on for the next election.
Certainly.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Scott, and I completely agree. You have to air these. You have to have the information. This is not a dangerous hearing. This is an incredibly important and crucial hearing. But thank you for participating in it. Senator Portman, are you available by WebEx?
I am.
I mean, it's just straight up truth. You investigate it, you come to a conclusion, the end. It should be that simple. It really should.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I've been moving around the Capitol as we've had to vote, but I was at the hearing earlier, and I appreciate the witnesses and all the information we've received. And, as I look at this issue and even watch some of the back and forth today between our colleagues, it seems to me that pulling this out of politics a little bit and having a bipartisan group that is more independent look at the issue is a good idea, in part because most of us don't believe that this ought to be something that the federal government usurps from the states. In fact, we believe that the Constitution got it right, and that generally speaking, it's better to have the states handle this. But there are obviously many disparities between how the states do it. So there was discussion earlier, I think it was of the Carter-Baker Commission. I would ask you, Mr. Starr, is this time for us to establish a commission? I've been involved in some of these commissions. I've been a commissioner and co-chaired some that have worked, some that haven't worked. But often they can be quite effective at sort of taking the partisan poison out of an issue and addressing it in a very straightforward way. If you had a distinguished Democrat and a distinguished Republican and commissioners who are dedicated to increasing the confidence in our elections, do you think now is the time for us to establish such a commission that could report with plenty of time before the next midterm election and help to give the states a sense of direction and perhaps even a template of best practices?
The short answer is yes. In light of the acrimony and the division with respect to the 2000 election, bringing together Jimmy Carter and former Secretary of State Baker was, I think, very efficacious. They made thoughtful recommendations, but they bring attention and shed light on what the issues are. And so, yes, I think taking it out of what is clearly continuing to be a highly bitter and acrimonious discussion, and to say to the American people, we're going to take a look at this, and we're going to try to, in fact, improve in the great spirit of reform. We want honest elections. Abraham Lincoln, the subject of the fraudulent mail-in campaign. Let's not lose sight, even though I'm thankful that foreign interference and so forth, and I very much admire Mr. Krebs and all that. But we're really talking about down in the boiler room, so to speak, of American elections. And that's where I think these reforms need to be, and safeguards need to be in place.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm looking forward to working with one of my Democratic colleagues to try to promote this idea. We've had some discussions of it already. And I think, again, today, what we've heard is indicative.
I'm kind of silent in this one because it seems so obvious to me that there should be something in place to figure out the legitimacy of the vote. That just seems kind of inherent to me. Like the fact that that's not a thing, I mean, I've got nothing to comment on that. Of course that should be a thing. Like, obviously.
Of the degree of intensity on this issue and the need for free and fair elections, I think everybody agrees with. Secure elections, absolutely. And you mentioned Mr. Krebs. Chris, thank you for your service at CISA. I agree with what was said earlier about the fact that during your time there, you were instrumental in building up our defenses on the cybersecurity side. Particularly, thank you for working with Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose so well. Frank LaRose and you, I think, were able to provide some examples for other states, as I understand it. You can speak to that. But we have in every county in Ohio the so-called Albert Intrusion Detection Monitoring hardware, which is designed to detect suspicious cyber activity. Can you comment briefly on the benefits of using this kind of detection and monitoring hardware and how it worked?
Yes, sir. First off, I want to thank you for actually just the state of Ohio. For some reason, in my senior staff in my front office, two of my top 3 advisors happen to be from Ohio. So you're doing something right there. The Albert systems are intrusion detection.
I'm going to put on my mask after you said that, since Harper had his Ohio mask on earlier.
So the Albert systems are intrusion detection systems that effectively sit on the network, sit on the wire, that capture traffic, that we can work with our intelligence community partners and develop what's known as signatures, looking for known malicious activity or known interaction with suspicious IP addresses, just looking for bad interaction. And it gives us a good insight into what sort of behaviors may be happening on those networks. And they are actually pretty key after the 2016 election. Once we were able to get a sense of what was happening in Illinois, we could load up some of those signatures and then go do forensics. It is a passive system. It's a forensic system. Where we need to go, though, is building on the trust we've developed through the Albert sensors and through the ISAC and through the coordinating councils, is start deploying more advanced technologies. And I'm specifically talking about some of the endpoint detection and response capabilities that'll actually sit on a computer in a state and local office and be more of a real-time monitoring and mitigation capability. That's how we continue moving forward. We need the same capability in the federal government. We're not there yet, but we have to continue advancing. And I think Congress.
Well,
I'll stop.
Yeah, Chris, and I, again, as you know, I've talked about this. I appreciate what you did for elections. I also am very concerned that our federal government is not up to the task generally. And that's another topic for another hearing, perhaps one where you'll be back to testify. But look what's happened just recently. In the last week, we found out that a very sophisticated group of hackers got into the computers of some of our most sensitive agencies. And so we obviously have a lot of work to do. And I'm not suggesting that CISA was at fault there. But on the other hand, I think we have not yet given even CISA adequate resources and authority to be able to handle all these issues, not just the election issues. But obviously, we have a huge problem right now with cyber attacks, and we don't know all the details yet. And I won't ask you to get into stuff you don't know about, but it was a massive cyber attack on federal agencies that undercut our national security. We know that. By the way, Senator Paul earlier talked about the fact that
the largest in U.S. history, I'm pretty sure.
There has been some lack of understanding between what you testified to and what you stated as to the election being secure from cyber attacks, and this notion that there were not instances of irregularity and fraud in this election, which of course there have been in every election in the history of our country, and there were in this election, and we've heard about some of those today. Is Senator Paul correct? And I guess I would slightly amend what he said. He said that your focus was just on foreign adversaries. My sense is your focus was not just on foreign adversaries, although you feel fairly confident that that did not happen this time. And obviously, based on what happened in 2016 with the Russians, this is good news, but also with regard to domestic cyber attacks. Is that what your report was about? Is he accurate in saying that?
Yes, sir. So, when you come into federal office, you pledge the oath to uphold and defend the Constitution from threats, foreign and domestic, and that's what we did. The focus of the statement, the joint statement, was security. It was secure. I think terms have been conflated here, alleging that we were speaking to the fraud aspect. We absolutely were not. We were talking about security, hacking, manipulation of these machines.
As I've emphasized in all the previous videos, and these goddamn senators keep phrasing it in the way when they talk about him that he verifies that there's no fraud for the whole fucking election. It's ridiculous. Go back and watch the fucking previous ones. You can literally see these fucking senators propping this guy up. Yeah, he's saying that it's all good. You're literally hearing him right now say no. The cybersecurity part only from foreign governments. Only. That's all he fucking did.
That was the thrust of the statement.
Yeah, I think that's very important to point out. And I think a number of people were confused about that, including perhaps some folks in the administration. Post-election, there's been a lot of talk about signature matching. And I'll end with this, Mr. Chairman. I know we're getting over time here, but in Ohio, what we do is, and we've been doing this for 15 years quite successfully, we send out an application for an absentee ballot. It's then a no-fault absentee. That's how I vote. But you have to send in an application including a signature. Those signatures are checked. Then the signature on the actual ballot, once you receive the ballot, you send that in. You have another signature, that's checked. And then, of course, the two are compared. They also, in Ohio, have access to other signatures if there is some confusion as to whether it might be the right person or not. Could you, Mr. Krebs, or others, perhaps comment on that system? Is that a good way to ensure that you have the protection that we all want to have, that the person who requested the ballot is an eligible voter, and that the return ballot was completed by that same person?
It would be, but you've got to verify that when those signatures being checked, you need to verify that that person doing that is doing it correctly. That's the only kind of kink in the armor for that one. So as long as you're making sure that that vote is that vote, yeah, for sure. And the only place I could break down is when it's being taken out by the whoever the fuck is opening the letter.
Not an expert on the system, seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, classic.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
Sir, this is State Representative Frank Ryan. I would tell you that that is a good system, and that would alleviate a significant number of the concerns that I had in the election. And based upon some of the comments that were made by many of the senators and the testifiers, I would indicate that we saw a major problem with the dot-com bubble in 2001, which led to the Sarbanes-Oxley bill, much of which is the basis of my testimony today. Then in 2008 and 2009, we had the crisis that happened in the banking industry with the no documentation loans. We saw how that worked out and led to the Dodd-Frank bill. I would hope that would happen in 2000 elections and in the Abraham Lincoln election, in this most recent one in 2016 and 2020. There would be similar legislation that could help us restore the confidence that people have that there's some degree of uniform perspective about the requirements that each of the states needs to be able to comply with. What Ohio is doing would have alleviated a major amount of the concerns I had when we had a Supreme Court that decided to legislate from the bench.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may say just a word, and that is, I think what Senator Portman, you have identified is a best practice. And it certainly qualifies as one of the things that perhaps a commission, if one is founded, could say, we have canvassed the entire 50 states, and here are the best practices. The recommendations could be based on experience as opposed to...
I mean, I can't believe that they don't already have that, but yeah, that's a perfect idea. Perfect fucking solution.
Theoretical constructs. Let's just see what has worked in the various states with reputations for honesty and integrity.
Yeah, that would be the objective. Thank you, Ms. Starr, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence.
Thank you very much, Senator Portman. Now, on behalf of the chairman, I'm going to recognize myself. So thanks to the witnesses for being here. I just want to say how important it is that we're having today's hearing. Let me just give you an example why. Yesterday, I'm from the state of Missouri. Yesterday, I was talking with some of the constituents back at home, a group of about 30 people. Every single one of them told me that they felt they had been disenfranchised, that their votes didn't matter, that the election had been rigged. These are normal, reasonable people. These are not crazy people. These are reasonable people, and who, by the way, have been involved in politics. They've won, they've lost, they've seen it all. These are normal folks living normal lives who firmly believe that they have been disenfranchised. And to listen to the mainstream press and quite a few voices in this building tell them after 4 years of nonstop Russia hoax, it was a hoax. It was based on, the whole Russia nonsense was based on, we now know, lies from a Russian spy. The Steele dossier was based on a Russian spy. After 4 years of that, being told that the last election was fake and that Donald Trump wasn't really elected and that...
As I said before, we all trust the mainstream media. Why wouldn't we trust them? They're always telling us correct information. Every story they tell is true.
Russia intervened. After 4 years of that, now these same people are told, you just sit down and shut up. If you have any concerns about election integrity, you're a nutcase. You should shut up. Well, I tell you what, 74 million Americans are not going to shut up, and telling them that their views don't matter and that their concerns don't matter and they should just be quiet is not a recipe for success in this country. It's not a recipe for the unity that I hear now the other side is suddenly so interested in after years of trying to delegitimize President Donald Trump. So suffice it to say, I'm not too keen on lectures about how Missourians and others who voted for President Trump and now have some concerns about fraud, about integrity, about compliance with the law should just be quiet, and that they are somehow not patriotic if they raise these questions. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. Let me talk about the First Amendment. Judge Starr, I want to begin with you because I know that you have spent much of your life.
Yeah, this guy seems a little bit intelligent there. Seems to know what he's talking about, and he's got a bit of passion behind him too. Much more lively after listening to the older fellows just give their little speeches. Holy shit. No offense to them, but they're definitely slow. This guy's giving me fucking energy again, ready to get going.
As a litigator defending the First Amendment, have you ever seen anything like we saw in the closing days of the election when you had the biggest corporations in the history of this country, the most powerful corporations in the world, Facebook, Twitter, working with the Democrat campaign to suppress legitimate reporting on Hunter Biden, who we now know is under federal investigation for
Under a federal investigation.
Wire fraud, tax evasion, other things. Have you ever seen anything in your career like that, Judge Starr, where we have these giant corporate conglomerates censoring and suppressing news directly bearing on an election weeks beforehand and doing it apparently in conjunction with one of the major political parties? Have you ever seen anything like that?
No, I think we live in a new age, and we need to go back to great lessons from constitutional law, as you well know, Senator Hawley, and Justice William Brennan, an icon of the Warren Court, saying that our democracy is based upon robust and uninhibited debate. And Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes saying, let's test things in the marketplace of ideas. You can't test places, ideas and theories unless you allow the marketplace of information communication to flourish.
Well said. I agree with that 100%. And, you know, it's an extraordinary thing not to be able to get. I've had Jack Dorsey, Mark Zuckerberg under oath. We've asked them, did you coordinate with the Democrat campaign? How was it that within minutes of this story breaking, that both of those major corporate giants decided that they would suppress this story, and exactly what the Biden campaign wanted them to do? They won't answer questions. I've asked the FEC to determine whether or not this was an illegal campaign contribution on the part of these corporate entities. And I just can't fathom why anybody who cares about free speech in this country would be fine with these mega corporations controlling what people can and cannot say and trying to intervene in a presidential election. Let me ask you.
This guy is fucking brave. He just went up against Facebook. Sure, they're on a fucking decline. No one's using them anymore. But they're still insanely fucking powerful. And this guy is standing up to them. That's fucking bold. That's fucking impressive.
Judge Starr, about something else. Let's talk a little bit about mail-in balloting. In your written testimony, you discussed the findings of the Carter-Baker Commission, and you've mentioned that again here today. That commission commented on the use of mail-in ballots after the 2000 election. Can you tell us a little bit about that commission's finding on mail-in ballots, as you recall it, and talk about some of the warnings that commission put into place?
Yes, the commission was referring to absentee ballots, but of course, in light of what has happened in this presidential election, we're now talking about the unprecedented use of mail-in ballots. And their concern and their warning of former President Carter and Secretary of State Baker is that this is a mechanism or a platform for fraud and abuse. Be careful about it. Have safeguards in place. And I think that's at the bottom what some of these concerns are. How did dead people vote, accepting that allegation from Nevada? It is because of inadequate safeguards. The dead person didn't walk into the ballot, into the voting booth and vote. Someone voted for him or her. We have to have those safeguards in place. And that's what the commission was saying and issuing that fervent warning that it may get worse in a deeply divided country.
26 states, as I understand it, when it comes to mail-in voting, Judge, 26 states now in this country allow third-party ballot harvesting of mail-in votes. That's where you can pay a third party to go distribute the ballots. And you can't do this in my home state of Missouri because we have control similar to those in Ohio that Senator Portman was talking about. But in other states, 26 states, you can pay a third party to go distribute the ballots. You can pay a third party to pick up the ballots. There's no chain of custody there. There's no verification. This seems to me an invitation to fraud and abuse. I've introduced legislation to end third-party ballot harvesting nationwide, to make it illegal nationwide. Would you?
It's literally called ballot harvesting. Like, you don't need to explain it any more than that. Those phrases should not go together. Holy fuck.
Would you agree, Judge Starr, that looking at something like third-party ballot harvesting is a common sense approach? By the way, some House Democrats even have endorsed this approach. Would you agree with me that that's a common sense place to start when we think about preventing fraud and addressing it in our elections?
Yes, because the opportunity for fraud and abuse is so rife and omnipresent with that kind of, if I may now call it that, worst practice. So many states have best practices. We heard from Senator Portman about Ohio. Other states have these safeguards in place. Let's put safeguards in place, but one of them is let's eliminate practices that are so prone to fraud and abuse.
And I think that's just the very beginning of what we should do. We should also make sure that poll watchers from both parties can be present at all times, that there are eyes on ballots, cameras on ballots at all times, that there's signature verification requirements that are mandatory, that there's mandatory reporting.
It genuinely leaves me speechless that this isn't how it fucking already is. Like, this is genuinely surprising that this kind of shit doesn't already fucking happen. How?
Reporting requirements about where we are in the count, where the states are, so the states just can't go dark for days at a time. All of this stuff ought to be common sense. There is no reason we should just shrug our shoulders and say, well, fraud happens all the time, you know? No big deal. It is a big deal. It's a very big deal. And for millions and millions of Americans in this election, it's a very, very big deal indeed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hawley, for your questions and for standing in. Based on one question and the answer from Judge Starr, I just want to read from my opening statement from last hearing. In his reflections on progress, peaceful coexistence, and intellectual freedom, Russian dissident Andrei D. Sakharov wrote, quote, "The second basic thesis is that intellectual freedom is essential to human society. Freedom to obtain and distribute information, freedom for open-minded and unfearing debate, and freedom from pressure by officialdom and prejudices. Such a trinity of freedom of thought is the only guarantee against an infection of people by mass myths, which, in the hands of treacherous hypocrites and demagogues, can be transformed into bloody dictatorship. Freedom of thought is the only guarantee of the feasibility of a scientific, democratic approach to politics, economics, and culture." I like to think of this hearing as a demonstration that freedom to obtain and distribute information to the public. There's nothing dangerous about that. It is essential to our freedom. It's essential to our country, to our democratic republic, and is essential if we're going to restore confidence in this election system we have.
Yeah, of course.
We have to do this. We can't ignore the problem. The first step in solving any problem is admitting you have one and then dealing with it honestly, gathering the information. This hearing, as all my hearings have been a problem-solving process, first gathering the information. That's what we're trying to do here today.
That's exactly. All right, good work, everyone, sitting through that. It was a long one, but we got through it. It's all done now. There's a small little clip at the end there, which is just a voice call. Some lady called in. Couldn't get a webcam working, obviously. So I'll release that one tomorrow. It's not that important, but I'll still put it out there. Anyway, that's it. We're done. All over now. So as you can see, quite a few important senators there think that this election did have something sus fucking going on with it. So, I mean, now we've just got to wait until the 6th and then, you know, kind of see what fucking happens with that. It's going to be a very, very, very interesting time ahead. I don't think I've ever seen the political system like this before. Not that I'm very old, so I can't really fucking comment on that too much, but definitely in my lifetime, this is the craziest shit I've ever fucking seen. So just to be here commenting on it, it just makes me fucking happy. I get to watch it from the outside, eating a fucking pile of popcorn as I watch the whole fucking thing play out. Brilliant, brilliant. All right, stay tuned. I'm going to be covering more as the election results get counted in DC, so stay tuned for that one tomorrow, and hopefully I'll be putting up another video tonight just of what's been happening the past week and so. But yeah, stay tuned for that video tonight, and then tomorrow morning, bright and early, gonna get up. I'm gonna start a live stream at 3 o'clock, so if you want to be part of that, come join it. I'll be sharing the links everywhere. Anyway, don't forget, like, subscribe, and share it around. Thanks for watching, everyone.